TSA whistleblowers say that over a period of 5 years, they watched $1 billion worth of cash go through Minneapolis airport, along with a suitcase filled with brand new passports. What is going on? Let's get into it. Here we go. So it's one thing to figure, okay, billions and billions of dollars of fraud has happened in Minneapolis. How did they get the money? They didn't wire all the money out of the country. That amount of money is just not. Wire fraud is trackable, right? So, sheer cash? I mean, it seems absolutely absurd that TSA agents didn't stop this from happening. But it looks like that's exactly what's going on. Here we go.
Suitcases filled with millions of dollars of cash. And the couriers were always Somali men traveling in pairs. And they got through the checkpoint. It just really absolutely blew my mind the first time you open a suitcase and you see millions of dollars of cash. And typically what would happen is a Leo or a law enforcement officer would come, check their credentials. I don't know what kind of questions they asked them, but their IDs were always documented, and probably their plane tickets as well. So there is a trail of that out there. And I would believe with all the cameras at the airport that if they started there, they could probably find each and every individual that brought money through the checkpoint.
Obviously, this seems suspicious, if not alarming, given what seems to be a pattern here. So you're talking about millions of dollars flying out of Minneapolis, and you think it happened about every week or so? Is that right?
So it certainly seemed like it happened every week. The suitcases came in, and it was always, the MO was always two Somalian men traveling in pairs. Sometimes they both had suitcases. And so the process was, as a TSA agent, we would pull the bag, and then we'd bring them to a private screening room. And we would open the suitcase and make sure that that's all it was stacks of cash. And a Leo would come and maybe question them and for sure take a picture of their identification, and I'm assuming their plane ticket. I'm not sure. So,
and then you guys get out of here. You guys take that cash and you just go fund that terrorism. I mean, how absurd is this? I have no reason not to believe this lady. You know what I mean? And she doesn't appear to me to be somebody that is in it for the story. That doesn't make sense. And we have literally been tracking this kind of fraud happening in Minneapolis for probably close to a decade, right? Close to a decade. It's absolutely insane that this is going on and nobody's done anything. That it took a YouTuber to go, hey, wait a minute. Got any kids in this daycare? You know what I mean? It's absolutely mind-blowing. So $1 billion going out of the airport? That makes perfect sense to me. Absolute sense to me.
There is a trail out there between that. I mean, it has to be documented somewhere, and all the cameras in the airport, I would imagine if they'd like to find all this cash, they should start at the airport. Because in the 5 years I was there, I believe $1 billion went through the airport.
$1 billion. As if this isn't troubling enough, Liz, it's not just money. You watched leave MSP, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. There was another instance, again, a Somali man that had a carry-on luggage filled with brand new passports. And he was allowed to get through the checkpoint. So where he went with those passports is anybody's guess.
I mean, if you or I take $10,001 and try and get through TSA, we're going to get absolutely flagged. I mean, it's not going to be pretty, right? If we go through security checkpoint with a whole bunch of passports? I mean, there's going to be questions. There's going to need to be some explaining to do. Know what I mean? I mean, the more and more this stacks up, it almost becomes to the point where you'll just be like, well, yep, that makes about sense, because why wouldn't they do this? They had absolutely zero constraints on what they could do. Oh yeah, you guys just get those passports out of there. Get those passports into the hands of those Somalis that need them to come back here. So you guys can just run more and more money out of the country. More and more of Minneapolis taxpayers' dollars. That seem reasonable? Yeah.
This is really incredible to hear. So it sounds like you're raising alarms with your colleagues, but you have to wonder how many people knew about this. Where were they all back then?
That is a good question. And I don't know how my colleagues felt about it. I've been out of TSA for quite a few years. So since all this fraud came out, the connection's been made. I didn't feel good about it then, and now it certainly all makes sense.
Recently, the City Journal published an article stating that, quote, federal counterterrorism sources confirm that millions of dollars in stolen funds have been sent back to Somalia. And in talking about al-shabaab, a terrorist group there, they reported that a confidential source said the largest funder of al-shabaab is the Minnesota Taxpayers. Judging by what you saw for yourself during the time you were a TSA agent, do you think there's any truth to this?
Absolutely. Knowing what I know now, absolutely. There's no question in my mind that money went to al-shabaab.
It sounds like you've had a difficult time kind of living with this over these last few years.
Well, it's been uncomfortable because at the time, seemed so lackadaisical that these people could get through the airport with all that cash. Time.
I don't think it's lackadaisical at all. I think it's on purpose. I think we've seen the uncovering of a massive, purposeful campaign to bring Somalians here and then have them fund whatever on the other end, on the other side, and have it at the expense of Minnesota taxpayers. But it's not just Minnesota taxpayers. I mean, I think this goes to many, many, many other cities, counties, states. I think the fraud that is involved with this, because think about it. If the Somalis can figure out how to do this and they have an average IQ of like 68, just do a quick Google search. What's the average IQ of a Somalian individual from Somalia? It's between 68 and 84. If they can figure this out and get away with it, I mean, it's on purpose and it can't be that hard to do, right? Getting on an airplane with $250,000 in cash. Again, if we did that, oh yeah, Mr. Reynolds, let's talk about this. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just going to Somalia with it. No, you're not.
After time, it wasn't a one-time thing.
At this point, more than a few Minnesotans have told us about suspected fraud. I've heard from state employees, business owners, even a commercial real estate broker who was telling me recently how they've just been bombarded with calls from members of the Somali community looking to rent any kind of office with just an address, just in case they get audited. They're actually openly admitting all of this. It just seems to be playing out, for everyone to see. But even fraud in Minnesota is now making...
That isn't really interesting. That's one of the reasons I wanted to record this podcast as well. That is an interesting angle. Commercial real estate broker. Hey, you got any space for me? We kind of think that the heat's coming down. You know how Tampon Tim, he's out of there? Well, we need to get things lined up here on the up and up. So you got any space? How would they backdate leases? How are you going to create just that whole thing? The mechanics of that are going to be difficult at best, because how are you going to prove that you had, that space during the time where all this money, flew out the window? How are you going to work that out? Those are some of the mechanics. I'm like, all right, people are on the run. They are worried that they're going to get busted and they're not going to have an alibi. They don't have a space for the kids, and they're just literally taking money hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, individual daycares, just absolutely fleecing the American population, because I don't think this is just Minneapolis. I think it's Seattle for sure. I think it's Idaho. I think it's Ohio. I think the list just goes on and on and on. And it's some wild stuff. And then where did all this money go to? You know, did it go to economic development in Somalia? I don't think so.
National headlines, it still seems, though, like elected officials aren't really doing anything about it or trying to ignore it.
It is so frustrating. It was frustrating when I was a TSA agent, and it's certainly frustrating now watching the state's administration doing what they're doing.
Which is basically saying, hey, Donald Trump, he's got a lot of fraud as well. And they list off, just a bunch of nonsense. Yeah, they don't like the $400 million he spent on the ballroom. It's like, that's not exactly fraud there, folks. That is not Somalians coming into the country, not integrating, not getting their citizenship, but absolutely fleecing the American people.
Walz and Omar, honestly, they should both resign in shame.
I think they should be indicted. Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, I think they should both be indicted. If they knew about this and they didn't do anything about it, they're complicit. They're complicit. How deep does this go? I think that's what we're going to find out. But we also thought we were going to find out about the Epstein files, didn't we? Yeah, how's that working out? No Epstein files. Come to find out that, Epstein, he did kill himself, hung himself on his knees. Physics, who knew, right?
Why did you want to come forward and share your story?
Because I think Minnesotans need to know that billions of dollars left through the airport. And it was cash. It was literally suitcases full of cash.
So what is your message to our so-called leaders here in Minnesota?
That this just should not be allowed to happen. When they come through the airport, they absolutely should not be able to bring suitcases full of cash. Who goes with millions of dollars in a suitcase week after week, time after time, year after year? And all Somali people.
I don't know. I do not have an answer for that. This is the scope of this. This has been going on for a long time. And you guys have been sending me this stuff. You know how it sounds like it's a conspiracy theory? What's the big joke I always tell? I especially tell my family is, and they're mostly conservative, is what's the difference between right-wing conspiracy theory and the truth? And it's, the punchline is about 6 months. And they're always like, oh, yeah. But there have been so many of these Somali stories. And why is it Somalia? Is it because their country is in just such utter, if you can even call it a country? They basically have nothing going on from an actual country type structure. Is that it? Because they got nothing and they're willing to risk it all and they look the part and nobody's going to question them. You got two guys from Somalia running $250,000 once a week through the airport. Tell me that doesn't raise flags somewhere, somehow. Apparently it doesn't. Here's a story that came out in 2018, well before Tim Walz came into office, right? And so how is this stuff with investigative reporting? And then why all of a sudden does Nick Shirley's piece just absolutely, rattle the cage? It's like it got to the point where folks couldn't keep it undercover any longer, and then all of a sudden, boom, the fuse is lit and off we go. Let's look at this piece from 2018.
Investigating what appears to be rampant fraud in a massive state program. A fraud suspected of costing Minnesota taxpayers as much as $100 million a year. The reporting is based on public records and nearly a dozen government sources who have direct knowledge of what's happening. These sources have a deep fear, and there's evidence to support their concerns that some of that public money is ending up in the hands of terrorists. We begin at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. where mysterious suitcases filled with cash have become a fairly common carry-on. It's the morning of March 15th. We're chasing a tip about a man who's leaving the country. Our sources tell us he just took a carry-on bag through security that was packed with $1 million cash. You can do that as long as you fill out one of these government forms. We're told these cloak and dagger-like scenarios now happen almost weekly at MSP International. The money is usually headed to the Middle East, Dubai, and points beyond. Our sources say last year alone, more than $100 million cash left MSP in carry-on luggage.
What we were interested in is where it was.
If you've got basically immunity and you just fill out the report and they're like, yep, get that out of here. Makes absolute sense, doesn't it? And that's how it happens. They actually do declare it. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. So that means there is a known trail on all of this cash. A known trail.
Going.
The national go-to expert on what's behind these mysterious money transfers is 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗠𝗠𝗜𝗨. He's a former Seattle police detective who spent 15 years on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force until his retirement.
It's an outright crime. It's unbelievable.
𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗠𝗠𝗧 tracked millions of dollars in cash that was leaving on flights from Seattle. It was coming from ḥawalas, businesses used to courier money to countries that have no official banking system. Some immigrant communities rely on ḥawalas to send funds to help impoverished relatives back home. 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗠𝗠𝗧 discovered some of the money was
which makes it the perfect cover because they've got no banking system. Funny how that works, right? Hey, why is it all going to Somalia? Well, here's why.
Being funneled to a ḥawala in a region of Somalia that's controlled by the al-shabaab terrorist group.
So I talked to a couple sources who had lived in that region, and I said, if money is going to this ḥawala, do you think it's going to al-shabaab? And he said, oh, definitely. That area is controlled by al-shabaab, and they control the ḥawala there.
He says when the money arrives, whether it was intended for legitimate purposes or not, al-shabaab or other groups demand a cut. As 𝗪𝗠𝗪𝗠𝗧 dug deeper, he found that some of the individuals who were sending out tens of thousands of dollars worth of remittance payments happened to be on government assistance in this country. How could they possibly come up with
They're on government assistance. This is 8 years ago. You know what I mean? This has been floating around forever. And yet Tim Walz is, I have no idea. And literally, and we're going to look at it in a second, but Katie Wilson in Seattle, oh yeah, we're not investigating. There's no reason to investigate. There's no reason not to investigate, is there? Because this is some pretty wild stuff.
Such big bucks to transfer back home.
We had sources that told us it's all about it's welfare fraud. It's all about the daycare.
To better understand the connection.
2018, our specialist from Seattle. And I've talked about him before because he has consistently been in the media. Hey, what are you guys doing with all that money? And he literally just said, daycare. That's how they run it. This makes absolute sense.
Between daycare fraud and the surge in carry-on cash, you have to look at the history of this crime.
For all the layering centers. You gotta roll with that one. That one's never going to get old, is it? Hey, you leer much today? Do some leering?
Years ago, the Fox 9 investigators were first to report that daycare fraud was on the rise here in Minnesota. We exposed how some businesses were gaming the system to steal millions in government subsidies meant to help low-income families with their child care expenses.
This is a great way to make some money. I think it's kind of that informal word of mouth.
In order for the scheme to work, the daycare centers need to sign up low-income families that qualify for child.
Okay, so the BCA surveillance video, BCA is who was just tossed off of the investigation for the shooting in Minneapolis. The FBI said, no, you guys are not going to be involved with this investigation, mainly because clearly their investigations don't really go anywhere.
Child care assistance funding. These surveillance videos are from a case prosecuted by Hennepin County. They show parents checking their kids into a center only to leave with them a few minutes later. Sometimes no children would show up. But either way, the center would bill the state for a full day of child care. This video from that same case shows a man handing out envelopes of what are believed to be kickback payments to parents who are in on the fraud.
Where was the money going?
I don't know exactly where it went, but it adds up when you begin.
Luxury vacations, vehicles, clothing, food, internet service, anything you can spend cash on, right? And a lot of it was just expensive stuff, just nonsense. You read about those stories as well. I mean, whatever you can spend money on, these guys did. And sometimes they did it with style. Some of the vacations I've read about, you're like, hey, that sounds pretty good.
To look at how many people are involved.
One recent federal case points to at least some of the money going overseas.
Of the United States.
This is video of Fawzia Ali being sworn in as a member of the City of Hopkins Park Board. As she was taking her oath of office, she was also under investigation for wire fraud and theft of public money.
Hey now.
State and federal agents had already raided Ali's daycare center in South Minneapolis. The business was suspected of billing the government for over $1 million worth of bogus child care services.
We found records that indicated that she was collecting a significant amount of money for a much larger number of children than were actually attending the center.
Did any of the money go overseas?
We are aware that some of the funds went overseas, which she was cashing out money from the business.
Do you have any idea what it was going for?
I can't say.
Can't say or don't know?
I can't say.
Investigators analyzed Ali's cell phone to track her activities. She'd taken a 2-month trip from Minnesota to Dubai and then Kenya, staying at times in $800 a night hotel rooms. She used an app on her phone to bill the state of Minnesota for childcare services while she was out of the country. Ali pled guilty to the daycare fraud and this March started serving time in a federal prison. She declined our request for an interview.
We believe that there's a scope of fraud out there that we need to really get our arms around and ensure that those dollars are going to the kids that really need them.
The acting commissioner for the Department of Human Services told us his agency has 10 daycares currently under active investigation for fraud. We've learned dozens more are considered suspicious. Search warrants obtained by the Fox 9 investigators show each one of the suspect centers has received several $1 million in child care assistance funds. According to public records and government sources, most are owned by Somali immigrants. Do you have any evidence to suggest this looks like organized crime?
There's a common pattern in how a lot of these are carried out, but beyond that, not something that I would directly categorize as organized crime.
Being wired to the United Arab Emirates. But those wire transfers stopped after a few centers were busted, which takes us back to the suitcases of cash at Minneapolis-St. Paul International. In 2015, investigators documented $14 million in carry-on cash. By 2016, it had mushroomed to $84 million, and then last year, $100 million. A trend all too familiar to former terrorism investigator Glenn Kearns. How much confidence can you say that it's likely some of this money is going towards terrorism?
I say absolutely. Absolutely. Our sources tell us that. Good sources. From the community, leaders. My personal feeling is we need a nationwide task force to clamp down on this kind of fraud.
This
Then we go right to this one. This was recent. This is November of 2025. Keep in mind, this video here was literally May 14th of 2018. This has been out there. Same damn story. Exact same damn story. And yet it took Nick Shirley. You kind of wonder, did they let this happen? Like, what's the deal here? How's this working? What's going on? So many questions, so few answers. But we've got this one, which is Ryan Thorpe and Christopher Rufo, that largest funder of al-Shabaab. That's the article we were talking about. And they basically dial in exactly how this looks. And the hawalas, where you don't have official banking system, and then you've got, cash coming into the system, and the hawala pays basically a bribe to the terrorist outfit, which oftentimes is al-Shabaab, which is a, division of al-Qaeda. It's wild stuff. And Tampon Tim, he knew about this. There is absolutely no way he did not know about this. And so then all of a sudden, on a national basis across the United States, you've got all of these mayors and governors of blue states basically saying, oh, there's nothing to see here. You guys are harassing our Somali community. Whereas you've got Greg Abbott in Texas going, hey, we need an investigation. We need an investigation. If there's any kind of, funny business going on here in Texas, we want to know about it. Our taxpayers' dollars are not going to go to al-Shabaab. So given what we know about the Minnesota deal, fact that newly elected socialist mayor in Seattle new mayor has no plans to look into possible local daycare fraud. That seem weird? I mean, you wouldn't want to just, take a quick peek? You wouldn't want to do a cursory audit? None of that? No. Here's that video by Como where Katie Wilson basically says, I've got no need to investigate. I mean, we're all good. We're all good.
Seattle's new mayor, Katie Wilson, has already posted on X what she thinks is going on at Somali-run daycares in her new city. I had a chance to catch up with the new mayor and asked her whether she believes there is any sort of impropriety going on at those centers. You had weighed in on January 1st, the day before the official swearing in, about some of the things going on outside Somali-run daycare centers. And I just want to quote the tweet in full context, that you condemn the surveillance campaign promoted by extremist influencers, family.
Extremist influencers, you mean investigative reporters. That right there should tell you everything you need to know. Oh, they're extremist influencers. They're blowing our cover. This isn't good. How are we going to fund all of our stuff? How are we going to get all of the folks that we are illegally bringing into the country to vote Democrat if we can't fund all this stuff?
Home child care programs are places of care, safety, and trust. They're privately operated businesses, not public spaces, and they're regulated by the government, not private individuals or groups, and that you're going to work with the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, Department of Education, SPD, and other city departments to ensure child care providers in our city are safe, secure, and protected. What have you done in those regards?
So we're working on that. So we have conversations going on with the departments. And it's just, I don't think it needs to be explained why it's problematic to have random people showing up to daycares. It is problematic for you. That is problematic. Because otherwise, not a big deal. I mean, got any kids in there? Got any are you running a daycare in there? That's not all that problematic. That is literally investigative reporting. Old school. So, for today's individuals, apparently that is crossing the line on decency. I think the fear in the Somali community is real. The fear in immigrant.
The fear of being exposed for what we're talking about. You're right. You're 100% right. I'd be afraid too if I had a daycare and I was funneling millions of dollars through it and I didn't have any kids, or I only had a couple and they were mine.
Communities are real, so we're taking that very seriously.
Along those lines, have you asked anyone to follow up on the fraud claims either to the Department of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs or SPD?
No.
So as far as you're concerned right now, there's no reason to suggest there's any sort of fraud.
This whole issue is not really about fraud, right? It's about dividing and conquering.
No, it is about fraud. It's 100% about fraud. And I just showed you a video from 2018 that says it's all about fraud. And then we got a TSA agent, $1 billion in 5 years. Where's all this money coming from? Daycares. These are some lucrative daycares.
It's about making an immigrant community a target, right? There's no reason.
There you go. Throw out that racism. It's racist.
To assume based on the identity of a daycare operator that their small business is doing anything wrong.
Well, you know what? If that's the case, then you shouldn't have any issues doing a little bit of a fraud investigation. All of this stuff, I think, is out there. It's on the table. Where does it go from here? Who knows, right? Who knows? Especially when you've got crazy people running around Minnesota. Just, time for you to get some lunch, big guy, and then getting capped because ICE tells them, hey, get out of your car. And they don't, and they get shot. You wonder how much of this stuff is I don't know. That's all I'm going to say on that. Because there is too much stuff in the hopper on these news stories for this not to be the case. You'd have to be a moron to not be looking into this if you're an official, or you're just completely corrupt. Are they all in on it? I don't know. And the fact that this is consistently happening in big blue Democrat-run cities, I'm hearing Boston. You know what I mean? Just, oh yeah, do they have a Somali community? Yep. Okay. So, yeah. Wild stuff. Is it true? Kind of seems like it, doesn't it? Where's it going to go? Stay tuned. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share with friends and family. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for joining. We'll catch up in the next one. Bye for now.